Hey everyone, welcome to the Lori and Tall Paul show. We're excited to have this opportunity, and our first episode is going to be on authentic leadership. So, Paul,
Lori. I'm glad that we picked this topic because I kind of have a little bit of a bone to pick with the way that the leadership, I guess, industry has presented authentic leadership. Because really, it, in some ways, in certain instances, it kind of flies in the face of some of the cornerstones of leadership. Okay, so let me explain with a story. All right. So
okay.
imagine if you are, I got to come up with a name. That's not really a name. Okay. Imagine if I'm Kragan, the manager.
Hey, Cragen.
Yeah, Kragan. That sounds more like my maybe like a Renaissance fair, alter ego. or
We
or
need
like
one of those things that will put that on you automatically,
yeah,
like pop
yeah,
in and
right. Uh-huh.
duh. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, but we're gonna use Kragan. Okay, so Kragan is he's a manager of people, and he is according to DISC, he's a high D. It's a high dominance.
Mhm.
He is also pessimistic. Um, he's controlling. Um, what else could he be? He's pessimistic, controlling. We'll just go with that, okay?
Okay.
And oh, and he doesn't trust people. So this is kind of like the worst kind of
Cragen sounds terrible. He sounds
D
like a bad
personality you
leader.
could get as a manager, right?
Okay.
Okay. So Kragan is getting ready for work one day, and he realizes that he's losing a lot of people. People keep quitting on him. And so he's starting to maybe get the idea that maybe it's him. He was not really sure, but maybe it's him. And maybe he should start exploring the idea that it could be him. And so he came across a leadership podcast, and he's shaving in the morning and he's listening to this podcast, but he's not really like fully engaged in the podcast because while he's also shaving, he's also thinking about how he's got to fire somebody today. Okay. But in the podcast, they're talking about authentic leadership. And the parts that Kragan hears are the things like, well, just be yourself, stay true to yourself. Um, Lead from your center, right? Use your strengths, right? These are all things that, leadership says for people to do. And so he hears this in the podcast. And so he starts thinking, okay, well, all right, I guess, yeah, I should be me. I should be authentic. I should just be me. And I'm already me. So I guess I'm doing it right. And he goes into work and he fires that person, and he just remains a high D. And uh, that kind of thing like flies in the face of some of the cornerstones of leadership, like you should be, as a manager, creating a space where people feel psychologically safe, right? You should be uh, interacting with people with some emotional intelligence. But because he thinks of authentic leadership as just be yourself, he's not doing any of that stuff. All right. So in your May 2025 newsletter issue, you wrote about authentic leadership. You brought up, let me see, you brought up that there's actually a definition, or there's actually a theory called
There it
authentic
is.
leadership theory. And you talked about 5 traits of an authentic leader. So how do we repair the broken square that Kragan thinks is authentic leadership?
So I think it's so interesting that you say that. I'm glad you brought it up because actually in my newsletter I said something to that, something to that effect, right? Like just be yourself, just be authentic,
Mhm.
right? Um, and sometimes being yourself, i- if you don't have the leadership traits that you should be exhibiting to build the other people around you, isn't always the best for the people that you're trying to grow, right? Or your peers or the people who are around you. And so what I tried to do in my newsletter without, boring people and having them roll their eyes, with the theory was to get into what does authentic really mean? right? So I talk about that, right? And again, I didn't go into too much detail. There is actually an authentic leadership theory, right? There's actually many leadership theories, but today we're going to focus on the authentic leadership theory. And one of the reasons why I really like this theory is it because it's focused a lot on if someone has authentic leadership skills, that the people who work for them are going to have strong job satisfaction, they're going to have positive attitudes, and they're going to be more happy at work. Okay. And so I do a lot of study on, what is this contribution, right? And what does it move towards, right? Or what is the outcome? So, five traits of an authentic leader that I highlighted here that actually Nancy Cohn had identified in the her article was committed to bettering yourself. So a true authentic leader is committed to making themselves better. So if we use Cragen in
Uh-huh.
your scenario, Cragen would look at what am I not doing well? How can I continue to grow? Right? Or maybe I recognize I have a pessimistic attitude and I want to get better. How can I do that? Right? So committing to get better for themselves.
Yeah,
The second part is that self-awareness. Now, does Cragen know he's pessimistic? Does Cragen know like he's a miserable person and his people don't want to work for him? Believe it or
probably not.
not, Paul, there are people who don't know, right?
Right.
There are people who don't realize they're the reason people are leaving.
Hmm.
They're the reason why their people aren't doing well. Their numbers are down, right? Motivation is low. They think it's the people not getting along with each other, but it's them. So cultivating a self-awareness that you may be the problem is big in the authentic leadership theory. Um, Three, they're disciplined. How they're disciplined, I can't expand on that. Okay, are they disciplined in their approach? Are they disciplined in the area of emotional intelligence? Right? Which
Hmm.
I'm inclined to believe is the case, right? They're disciplined in how they react. They're disciplined in how they roll out something, right? Maybe a new change, right? They're
Probably
disciplined.
disciplined in what was I going to say? Disciplined in following through on the changes they recognize they need to make after some self-discovery.
Absolutely. Yes. Not just for themselves, but also their team,
Hmm.
right? They're mission driven. They have a goal. And not only do they have a goal, they articulate that goal. So they're able to bring their people along with them because their people know what that goal is, right?
Hmm.
So you can see the best authentic leaders are people that have followers, people that come to them, that the people understand the goal. Like I'm on this mission with this person and we're going to help them succeed. So if Cragen was mission driven, Cragen would have people surrounded by him that want to help support that. Right. And then finally, this kind of leans in a little bit to the inspirational leadership theory, but they inspire faith. They inspire faith that we can get better, we can do better, right? Someone hears me, someone sees me. And that's the whole premise, I guess, of an authentic leader.
Okay. So let me go back to some of
Okay.
this. Okay. So because those are attributes, I feel like, of an authentic leader, but I'm not so sure they really answer what authenticity is. So let's see if we can go back. Let's see if we figure this out. I'm using my phone here, by the way.
Okay.
Okay, so they're committed to bettering themselves. Okay, so how does that tie in with authenticity? Well, the first thing that pops in my mind is they recognize that there's always room for improvement. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they recognize that there's always room for improvement, but they admit that there's room for improvement. So I'm glad that you brought that up because an authentic leader,
Mm, hmm.
right, is
Hmm.
somebody that admits, I don't know all the answers.
Hmm.
I made a mistake. You were right. I was wrong. They come back later to communicate that, right? I've made a
Yeah.
mistake, but also maybe accepting that somebody else's answer is right,
Yeah.
right over theirs. That's an example of authentic admitting that you're not perfect. And that's why you're committed to getting better.
That's interesting. What that makes me think of is because we're talking about transformation, right? So somebody's changing from one state to the next. They recognize they need to change and
Mhm.
they're willing to buy into that and make the change. So it's almost like they're not necessarily authentic to themselves because they're changing, but they're authentic to the concept of growth. Does that make sense?
Okay, but I disagree there a little bit,
Okay.
right? With
Okay.
with the authenticity part, because just because you see an opportunity to grow or
Mm-hmm.
because you are growing doesn't mean that you're not staying authentic to yourself. You're just maybe there's something inside of you saying, I want to be better, right? Like there's a piece that says, I know I can be better, whether that's how you communicate with a person, right? Actively listening to what someone else has to say, or maybe it's even just a skill, right? I don't know this and I want to learn more. That's an instance of where you're bettering yourself as a leader, right? You don't
Yeah.
stop growing, you continue to learn, right? And gain knowledge. So I disagree that when you say, okay, I'm committing to bettering myself or doing
Mm-hmm.
something else, that you're stepping away from your authentic self. I think you're just becoming more of who your authentic self is.
Okay. All right. I like it. All right. So let's go to the next one. They cultivate self awareness, right? So this means they have to kind of like with number one, they got to recognize there's things to change. And then they're open to maybe hearing other people's opinions about, what, how they're perceived. Um, they start to analyze, right, their own behaviors and reactions that they're getting from people. So they cultivate self-awareness. That's certainly authentic because you're focused on the person, you're focused on yourself. That's authentic, right?
Right.
I don't know if I really made a point there, but I'm
But
just
you're admitting who you are,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of people don't take that time to reflect or really look inside, like who am I, right? And I say this all the time, and maybe that's part of my awareness, right? I have ADHD. I know I have ADHD, right? I talk about it in my daily like work or when I'm training or communicating with people. I give an example of that. Same thing with my emotional response. I tend to be very reactive to situations, and this is an area where I committed to getting better. Okay. I recognized like I was not good, right? I was
Mhm.
very reactive in that space. And once you recognize that, you start to identify areas where you see it, right? You're out at the grocery store and you notice how you would have responded before, but now you've chosen to respond in a different way. That's another area of self-awareness,
Mhm.
right? Like being aware of it, but then also applying some sort of change and just
Yeah.
seeing it in your everyday life.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know how popular the graphic is, but I saw a graphic one time that shows that instant where something happens and then you have your first emotional response to it. And then do you react immediately or do you pause? And so that's like perfectly illustrative of what you just said in the grocery store example, right? Is when you have self awareness, you give yourself that opportunity to just pause.
That's right. Pause. And how am I going to choose to respond? And
Yeah.
I think an authentic leader chooses that route. They pause for a second and think about how they're going to respond.
I love it. Okay, so they're disciplined and they're mission driven. Okay, so let's compare those to the concept of authenticity. They are disciplined. So I like to test this stuff, right? That's all I'm doing. I'm just trying to test, right? What is said about it versus kind of how it's presented, I guess, right?
Right.
And so
Well, now you're making me feel like I got to get my research paper out on authentic leadership and present to you like why it's important.
I don't. No, no. This I buy into it. I believe all of this. I'm trying to find a deeper meaning. Is there a deeper meaning, or what's the deeper definition of authenticity? Right. I guess is what I'm trying to do. But if you're disciplined, right, that means that you have figured out a way to to keep yourself on track, to follow through, um, especially if you're making these changes that we're talking about. Um, can you think of any other way to tie not that it's not tied to it, but can you think of any deeper ways to tie discipline and mission driven to the idea of authenticity?
Well, I think the discipline part comes with what you just said, right? When you're self-aware, you recognize what needs to change, right, in that moment. And then you're willing to put that into practice too. So building a habit. So building a habit of the change that needs to occur, not beating yourself up when you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to commit to that habit of or whatever you're trying to change, right? When it comes to that self-awareness. And I think by setting that example as a leader, your team is more inclined to follow along, right? But being disciplined in the habit, disciplined in trying to get better consistently, and maybe even communicating that to your team as well. Like disciplined, and this is really what I believe, and I'd like you to come along with me.
Man, I think you just nailed it right there. Is like doing these things is will influence others to do them as well because they're
Yes.
seeing you make a change in yourself. They're seeing you improve yourself, right? And so to them that comes across as authentic.
Absolutely. And I think it also
Yeah.
gives people hope. We talked about this a
Mhm.
little bit, and how this all ties into like the people who work for you. It gives people hope that if my leadership is showing that there's a space for them to grow, I can also grow too. Or like I thought I was the only one who was really bad with people, right? Or communicating my thoughts with people, but my leader's admitting he's also not so good at that, and he's trying. Like I think when you show what's the word? Not just authenticity, but vulnerability. Those are the
Mhm.
two things that are
Mhm.
really linked, right? You're authentic, but you're also vulnerable to where you're admitting that, right? And just having the discipline to continue to show that or build upon that every day, I think helps tie that in.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, that's awesome. I think we nailed it.
so we still have five more. I was like, oh, Paul, I didn't expect that I was going to be challenged. So you did ask about the mission driven part. I don't know if you want to talk more about mission driven.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, if you got more to say about that, go for it. From my perspective, I was trying to find the thing that ties all five of these to authenticity and why they're tied to authenticity. And I to me, I we just found it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I just linked the last three together, right? The
Yeah.
the discipline, the habit building, like you're driven, you're on a mission, and you're bringing others along with you, and
Yeah.
that inspires the faith
Hmm.
that other people have in you as a leader, and maybe just the faith in themselves and the organization, right? To want to do better.